Good evening.
There you are. Good to see
Yeah,
you
it's
again.
just the two of us.
No hat this time.
No,
That was fun today. Thanks again for arranging it. And I continue to be impressed with Chuck and Nate and really
Oh.
everybody involved.
me too. I confess I'd grown accustomed to a lower standard of performance, particularly in the public works area.
Yeah.
And we had an interim, Carol, who came in, who was like a breath of fresh air. He actually got things done.
Right.
Yeah. For years, the mayor of Salem was either incompetent or corrupt, or both.
Or both.
Yeah. And so nothing ever got done. And
Yeah.
Salem kind of, watched Newburyport build this huge tourist business where Salem's much more accessible. And
Yeah.
anyway. And then Kim Driscoll came in, and then like in 2 years, suddenly the streets were clean. Halloween was under control. It's just like my former neighbor in the village is a long ago Navy senior chief, and he's kind of a red state guy, but he had his bumper sticker that said, it's really simple. Either you're competent or you're not.
It's true. Right.
Right, Tom?
That is absolutely correct. You either think the way he does or you don't think at all.
Well, that's the other thing about this particular chap.
How are you, Scott?
I'm doing well, Tom. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Beautiful day.
Oh man, it was beautiful.
I get to spend the day in Manchester too. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I
Yeah.
heard you went for a little walk around Gravelly Pond.
Spent a lot of the day out there and
Yeah.
had a really good tour of that and the Lincoln Street well, etc. And I've been to all those places before, but it's been a while, and it was really a lot of fun and helpful, very helpful.
There you go. I wasn't leaving. I just had to get up and open the door so the cat could get out.
I have 4 cats.
We don't train them, they train us.
Oh boy, isn't that the truth, huh?
My significant other says dogs have owners, cats have staff.
Yeah, that's true too. We enjoy them a lot. They're great, very entertaining. Hey, Sue.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. No Steve yet?
He's
up there.
He's back. He's back.
I need to switch to gallery. Oh, there we go. Hi.
Hi, Sue Croft.
Hi,
Sorry,
Tokyo.
the train was going by. And I had, as we say in my family, I had to let the dog out. Well, Sue, we all went swimming in Gravelly Pond today. You did
I bet
not.
it was cold.
It wasn't. The temperature at the shoreline was 75 degrees, water temperature.
Are you kidding?
No,
Wow.
24 Celsius.
Wow. I can't wait to hear about this, actually.
It's really mundane when they're doing it, but it's pretty exciting when you think about what they're learning. It's like cooking, it's just not that much fun for most people to be in the kitchen, but they love to sit down to the dinner.
Right.
They're rushing the doors. This is good. Good evening, Jeff. Hi,
Hello.
Randy, Fred. I see Peter, Helen.
Hello.
Excellent. Hi, Joe.
Coincidentally, the pentagram we didn't get yesterday was a cocktail. Oh. Trying to think of things with. There are many things we should have gotten. You got tactic, but we didn't think of tact. You got tactic, but was it tactic?
I can't hear you even. I'm really distracted. I'm late at this meeting.
Okay.
I think we'll leave that domestic background noise out. And I think I can call this meeting to order. Good evening, Mike, Olga, Gordon. Because I believe we have a quorum. Welcome to the September 14 meeting of the Task Force on Water Resource Protection, operating under the auspices of the Select Board of the Town of Manchester by the Sea, and holding remote meetings in accordance with various laws and proclamations from the state of Massachusetts. This is a public meeting and we invite public participation, although I believe we have yet to have a member of the public join us. But hope springs eternal. Our program for tonight, I will put on the screen briefly here to remind anybody who hasn't read it that after this brief welcome, we're going to review a meeting on September 7th with the Select Board, discuss really late-breaking information about the beginning of the Gravelly Pond groundwater source survey, here's some updates from working groups, review goals and timelines for the working groups which the Select Board is eager to get their hands on, vote on an amended work proposal from Scott, and review and approve as amended, if required, the minutes from the last meeting, and set a meeting date. At this point, is there anything else that I should be adding to that agenda anybody's aware of? You don't have to, it's not required that you state that now. All right, then we'll begin with a summary of my meeting with the Select Board last week, which I think was useful for them and I believe also for us. First, they reviewed the proposal from Dana Truslow and Scott Horsley to learn more about the sources of groundwater feeding Gravelly Pond. And after a few questions, they approved it unanimously. And it is in fact underway as of today. Second, they heard a brief version of the presentation on the last 10 years of usage by household in Manchester. And there was some discussion of that. The high points of the discussion First was about unaccounted for water, which was they were inclined to treat this as an operational issue, not a strategic issue for the task force. Although there are some possible connections, because there's always the potential for leaks in the private branches that take water into people's homes, or possibly legacy issues with larger properties that may have branches that are not metered because they weren't metered 100 years ago. So there are some issues that are a little bit more strategic. And Nate was there. I think Chuck was away and did an excellent job talking about unaccounted for water. And then there was some discussion about conservation measures. My sense is there's an appetite to move at some pace toward greater differentiation between rates for low usage and rates for high usage, perhaps also seasonal rates, drought rates in the select board. So the door is open for us to make those recommendations. Jeff.
Regarding unaccounted for water and operational, does that mean they're thinking that there are leaks in the system that we need to continue to repair? Is that what you mean by operational?
Yeah, operational would mean it's largely for DPW, Chuck and Nate and their contractors to take care of. So much as they hope that relining and replacing the School Street main, which is a legacy water main, will reduce unaccounted for water, and also replacing the old meters, which measure the output from the water treatment plant, which are quite old, with newer and better technology. But it'll take some time to see the effects of those things, obviously. And we have a pretty substantial way to go, was the message I think they heard loud and clear, both in unaccounted for water and in our average usage per gallon per capita, and in our seasonality. We kind of stick out many standard deviations from the norm of the state of Commonwealth of Massachusetts in a negative direction in all three of those. When you combine all three of them, as I said to them, this isn't the picture of Manchester I like to give to anybody in the state, in our neighboring towns. And it doesn't, I don't think it gives us a position of strength to negotiate grants and other things we might need. The other thing that came up in that meeting was that they voted to offer exemptions to commercial accounts. Exemptions from the ban on watering or limit to hand watering. And I think the trigger for that is a particular business which offers to detail your car using your hose and your driveway. And understandably, that particular business has been crippled by the rule that says you can't do that until 5 p.m. So that was an understandable decision, but I had to raise the caution that some of the commercial users are really large consumers of water, particularly the marinas, and to some extent the county club. And a blanket exemption for commercial users might not be a great idea. So I don't know how that's going to evolve in practice, but that's what happened on September 7th. Any questions? Okay, let's move to Scott. I don't think Dana is here tonight. She put in a long day of work in the bright sun, wearing her wellies, as the Brits say. But Scott, can you tell us what transpired and what we can look forward to?
Sure. Can you hear me okay, Steve?
just
Great.
fine.
Well, first of all, I really honestly want to thank Nate and Chuck and Steve. Fantastic orientation, and we were met at the treatment plant at 8 a.m. this morning. Got a great tour of all the facilities, got taken around. And I know some of you went on a similar tour earlier, because I remember hearing about it. So that was great. And then later, Steve arranged a meeting with both Nate and Chuck to review the Lincoln Street well area and the schools and whatnot. So I have to say, from my standpoint, it was a very productive day. We got a lot done. I was out there with Dana Treslow, who, as you recall, was contracted to do this thermal survey, which I'll explain in a minute and give you some very preliminary results. And she was assisted by one of my graduate students because her assistant was unavailable. So I pulled him in last minute, and I think he was great, and it was a great experience for him. So all went well. And maybe what I'll do, Steve, is if I can share my screen, just show a map and I can point to some things. I think I
Good
can.
idea.
Let's see, you need to enable me.
I
Or
have.
somebody, oh, you have, okay.
Yep, fire away.
All right, let's see. Let's see if this works out. Can you see that map?
Oh, we did for a moment. Yep,
Is it there? You can see it now?
Yes,
And can you see my
Yes.
pointer moving around?
yes.
Okay, great. So this is Gravelly Pond here, as you might recognize, and the shaded area, which again, I'll remind you, I'm colorblind, but it looks like yellow to me, this area,
mhm,
is the more permeable sand and gravel deposits, superficial geology. Now, what we did is, you may recall, Dana showed some slides of this, but I'll just describe it sort of narratively. We went along the shoreline and we started here on the southern shore near the treatment plant. And what we did is did transects out into the water. We started at the shoreline. We did every 2 feet out to about 6 or 8 feet into the pond. And at every 2 foot increment, we measured the temperature, first of all, of the surface water. And then we pushed a steel rod down about 2 to 3 feet into the sediments. And I should add, best we could, because the sediments were a little unforgiving in places due to cobbles and whatnot. And then took a groundwater measurement. Now, let me just briefly remind you, the principle here is that groundwater is at a pretty standard and consistent temperature year round, in the neighborhood of about low 50 degrees Fahrenheit, or let's say 12 degrees centigrade. And of course, surface water varies depending on the time of season. This time of year, it's around, as Steve mentioned earlier, in the 70-degree area. So there's a differential. Let's just say, if we're talking in Fahrenheit, let's say there's a differential of around 20-degree difference. And what we're looking for in doing this probing and measurement is to determine whether or not groundwater is coming up and discharging into the reservoir or vice versa. Let me take a step back and say groundwater, surface water interactions can go either way. You can have groundwater flowing into a surface water body, or you can have surface water flowing back into the groundwater. And this technique we use today is one way to document that. And I might add, this has been used successfully in court to convince a judge and a jury of this, which direction things are flowing. So this is somewhat of a standardized technique. And by pushing the probe, the temperature probe, down below the sediments, you're pushing that thermometer, if you will, into the groundwater. And if the situation is that the reservoir is recharging into the groundwater, then those would be about the same temperature, because at depth you'd be sampling essentially surface water that recently infiltrated into the sediments below the pond. However, if the temperature of the groundwater beneath the pond is colder, which is what we'd expect, then that suggests that the groundwater is moving into the pond. And the differential, how much it differs, is somewhat of a estimate, I'll say, of how much groundwater discharge there is, the rate of groundwater. And this is, I should mention this, I would call this a semi-quantitative technique, okay? This is a reconnaissance level analysis, so I don't want to overstate what we found today. But interestingly, and the reason I wanted to show this base map, it conforms quite nicely with the superficial geology. So we actually got to 3 locations today, and each location we probably did on the order of about 15 measurements. So we took 3 transects at each location I'm going to point to. So the first location, as I said, is right down here in the southern shore near the treatment plant and the intake. And we did a transect from where my pointer is. We actually did 3 transects from the shoreline out to into the pond and made these measurements. And at this location, we found very little difference, meaning that there's not a lot of groundwater discharge. And if you'll notice, there's not a lot of yellow there, which means there's not a lot of sand and gravel. This white area is glacial till, which has a much lower permeability and our understanding is that much less groundwater transport. So we went there first and again, didn't see a lot of groundwater discharge there. We then moved over to this location along this shoreline and found a very significant difference, about an 8-degree difference centigrade, which is of course more on the Fahrenheit scale difference between the groundwater, the lower measurement and the surface water. And that suggests a significant amount of groundwater transport into the pond, which again matches this superficial geology area quite nicely. And then the third location we went to is over here. There's and again, I'm sorry, colorblind. Is that red? This little red feature? Okay, these are bedrock outcrops, and many of you, maybe all of you, are familiar enough to know that this is a large rock you see at the surface as a good marker. In fact, we went there with Nate and the guys from the consulting firm that run the plant this morning, and we actually walked right in this area. This is a large, so we did a transect just to the north of that along this shoreline. We also saw a significant differential between those 2 measurements, not as much as over here. So if you want to try to translate this into quantitative, and again, I'll stress semi-quantitative, we saw more groundwater discharge here, a moderate amount of groundwater discharge here, and very little groundwater discharge here were our findings. And we will provide, Dana's going to prepare a map, and I wouldn't doubt she's working on it tonight because that's how she is. I asked her if she could provide this in advance for our next meeting, which I'm going to guess is 3 to 4 weeks out. I'll probably have it tomorrow, knowing how she works, to review. But this will show all the measurements, and we'll put this in more quantitative terms. Because of the substrate, we push a metal rod down into the sediments. We actually hammer it down. And I've got some photos of this, and Steve got to see the first version of this himself, along with Rose, is it?
Yep, Rosie, the wetlands retriever.
Wetlands retriever. And it was harder going than we expected. So we were unable to get, we actually had 5 locations we wanted to go to, this one being the first one, number 2 here, number 3 here, and then I believe number 4 was here, and then we were going to debate between going here and here for number 5. So we only got the 3 of them today. Dana is going to try to get back there on Monday to try to finish the work. But as of today, those are sort of my general preliminary draft observations, shall we say, and they do match the superficial geology. I should also mention that it is very possible to have a permeable sand and gravel deposit like this, but still have water going from the pond this way into the sand and gravel. That occurs quite commonly in these situations, but in this case, we found in both the northern location and this southeastern location flow into the reservoir. And I suspect this is in part due to the fact that by pumping water from the reservoir, you're creating what we call a hydraulic gradient from the groundwater into the pond. So that would be, it's kind of what we expected to see, but it's good to frankly document it. So what this is suggesting to me is that we can depend on these superficial geology maps to some degree to start to think about where is the water coming from, or the relative amounts of water coming from that are getting into gravelly pond.
Excuse me, Scott, there's a
yes.
question. There's a question from Ann Harrison. Go ahead, Ann.
Ann, go ahead.
recognizing that you're colorblind, what are the purple areas?
Okay, somebody's gonna have to help me. This here?
No, that's
That's
blue.
blue. That's gravelly
Move,
pond. So
move, move west, east,
east.
sorry, up,
North,
north,
there it is.
south a little bit, west a little bit.
Yeah,
Oh,
That's
these are lot lines. Is that what you're talking
No, no,
about?
no,
No.
no. That's an entirely different color.
Okay, okay.
yeah.
Sorry,
If
sorry.
you- Scott, if you scroll down in the menu on the right, there's
Oh,
a legend.
Okay,
And
this here?
no,
Oh,
you already have it. You just need to scroll down the menu, not the map.
oh, I'm getting bigger. Sorry.
There you go. Okay, there's the superficial geology. So those are inland dune deposits or marine regressive deposits.
Right here.
Yeah, not cranberry bogs. Those are the three lavender possibilities, and I think they're inland dune deposits.
Okay.
Okay.
How permeable are they?
I think they can be somewhat variable, but I would say on the permeable side. More so than glacial till typically.
Thank you.
It's also worth noting that the place where you found so far the strongest evidence that groundwater may be transiting into the pond is the closest point of approach to the Hamilton town capped landfill.
Which I believe is in this location here.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And we did, the other thing I should mention is in addition to the thermal gradient sampling, Dana did bring, and she described this to you at the last meeting. Some of you may remember something called a Henry sampler. I'm still trying to figure out who Henry is, but I've heard of this for years. It's a very small diameter way to take a groundwater sample once you get this rod into the subsurface. So she did one or two preliminary groundwater samples here, groundwater underneath the pond, and that is correct. Groundwater does exist underneath the pond, the reservoir. And she used her field meter for a specific conductance and did find a reading. I think she said around 500, I believe it's micromoles per centimeter in the groundwater and about 100 or 200 in the surface water. So that suggests that there's some influence there, but it's not a super high level. And it's a specific conductance is a very general indicator parameter. Could be for a variety of things, including road salts or other dissolved materials. So, but I do think since you brought it up, Steve, I mean, the landfill, the Manchester landfill is located just to the south of that, I believe. The Hamilton landfill is up here. And I think we do have, Nate was kind enough to send me a number of monitoring reports on both of those. And I've started to read through those. And I think it's something that obviously deserves continuing attention, even though they're closed. Groundwater moves slowly, and there may be some contribution from those landfills. We don't know yet if groundwater from this location gets to the reservoir. What we do know is groundwater is flowing into the reservoir from adjacent areas. How far back it goes, we don't know. But something that we'll look at a little further, and I can get back to you with further thoughts on that. But certainly something worth looking at continually. Are there other
Cool.
questions?
Scott, let me seize control here for a second. I'll show some of those.
Let me, yep, go ahead.
I'll show some of those photos. You can narrate. There's only 4 or 5 of these. You see that?
Not yet.
Oh, I should hit share then. There we go.
Oh, wow, look at that.
This was
Okay.
the first location, and this is the two of them at 2 feet out. And one of the rods is for creating a hole going down 3 or 4 feet. The other one has the temperature probe on it.
That's right. The one on the left with the sort of curly Q and the meter being held is the temperature probe.
And there's one right close to shore.
Yep.
Same location. Yep, there they are getting ready. You can see from the beach that the water level's down a little bit, but not extraordinary. Yep, there's the work site. I think that's it.
All right. Thanks,
Now
Steve.
there's the obligatory dog shot.
Ah, there you go.
Yep. Figure out how to unshare here.
So I will just mention that our intent here will be to finish this survey perhaps early next week, produce a map and a brief report, probably a couple-page memo report documenting everything. And then Dana and I will begin thinking about how this interacts and relates to all of the mapping that we have, including not only the superficial geology, but the zone 2 mapping, the watershed mapping, et cetera, because the overall goal where we're trying to get to is where does the water come from that gets into Gravelly Pond, and therefore where should we consider protection measures. The only other thought I will share with you, and Jeff, I see your hand up, so apologize for standing in your way, but I'll be brief. The other thought I want to convey before I forget is, and this is again, thankful to the conversations with Nate and others about just what's going on out there. We went over and looked at the Round Pond well, which of course pumps groundwater from the near the shore on the northwest side of the reservoir into the reservoir, which, by the way, I think is a somewhat of a unique situation. I'm not familiar with this occurring in too many other areas. And the history of it is pretty interesting too. Nate informed us of there was a 3-year period where that was stopped, perhaps to save some energy related funding. And you found out that that the reservoir itself didn't have enough capacity to service. And the interesting takeaway from that, we think, is that there is natural flow of groundwater into the pond, which is what we were able to observe today, but probably not enough to provide the demand that you're pumping from the pond. Therefore, the Round Pond wells are sort of a necessary amendment. And the reason I bring it up is because, again, my goal is to, based upon what I've heard from this group, is to ultimately come up with an amended protection area for Gravelly Pond, amended from our 1990 very simplified watershed map. And I believe that the interaction of this pumping of the Round Pond well, and I would say Round Pond and maybe other ponds like Beck's Pond, we also observed in the field some surface water connections between these ponds, which probably occur seasonally. Right now, the water is low, but there was evidence of surface water flow between some of these ponds. So there's a lot going on here, and my assessment so far is that the contributing area to Gravel Pond probably varies significantly on a seasonal basis, and also on how much you pump these wells. So it's a very dynamic situation. And we're going to try to take that into account in our analysis and our mapping. And I'll stop there. And I know Jeff has something.
Go ahead, Jeff.
You created another comment for me. As far as seasonal flow through those, quote, surface streams, personally, I've observed quite a bit over the years, and I've never seen those streams flow in. I assume Steve, I'm sure, knows what you're talking about, the dam area with the bridge going over it and stuff.
Yep.
Never, even at high water, never have I seen any flow in from there.
No.
So
Me neither, but there are connections elsewhere. For instance, Chabaco connects to Round.
so
Right, Beck,
I'm not going to get into Koi Pond from Gordon College, where they're talking about building something, Chabaco, where they're talking about building connections between Koi, Beck, Round. Absolutely, those must be studied. Those are, in my opinion, Scott, that connection from Round Pond, the pumping, is far more significant than any surface flow into there based on my observations.
Yeah.
Not
And
the
Jeff,
freshwater.
if I may jump in and clarify, because I'm really interested in your comment. We talked about this in the field. Are you saying that you've only observed flow from gravelly to round?
I've never observed flow either direction.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Um,
Well, as I told Nate when we were out in the field there, we were standing and looking at it, and my eyes suggested there was a gradient from round to gravelly, but I immediately told him that my eyes are not good at predicting gradients, so I discount that.
Over the next year, we'll continue to watch and see.
That would be
if
really
we have
helpful.
opinions.
And I'm also going to see if we've been generating some LiDAR data in the area, which is quite detailed topography down to way less than 1 foot. So we ought to be able to see the gradient in that ditch, I'm hoping.
I've looked at not quite that high resolution, but you and I could take it offline. And I
That
can
would be
show
great,
you
Jeff.
the
Love to do
places
that.
Where I think there's possible flow in. There's one place.
Okay, well, I'm very interested in that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk. My previous question before was, you sampled 3 places, you hope to sample 5 places. Where's the law of where are the diminishing returns there? Because, I mean, in my mind, I want to sample every 50 feet all the way around the pond. What do you think we need for a good overall reading?
Well, that's a good question. And I think the map that I showed you on a Cape Cod pond that we did actually with the US Geological Survey showed very detailed mapping around the entire pond, which may be the root of your your thought. And I would agree with you. The difference is the permeability, not the permeability, but the accessibility of getting the probes into the sediments. On Cape Cod, you simply push them with your hand. Here we're hammering, so it can be done. It'll just take longer. And I guess I would like to reserve judgment. Ideally, I agree with you. Why not have a complete data set around the pond? But recognize that this is, again, even with that, this is still a qualitative method, and it's probably one that varies seasonally as well. In fact, not probably, I'm sure it does. So we're taking a snapshot, and I think we're using it really as a preliminary reconnaissance method, and ultimately confirmatory on, like I said, the geology. I'm waffling on my answer because it's a good question, and what I should just say is let me think about it and get back to you, because we may want to do that. We may want to do more and get a complete data set.
All right,
Okay,
we'll round up volunteers if that helps you.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
Okay.
you know,
I'm gonna tie a string around this conversation right now because we need to get on, and I know there's going to be a lot more information at our next meeting from continuation of this work, but bravo for getting it going, Scott, and tell Dana and Jared also the same. As Jeff knows very well, and some of the rest of you may know, when the wells are pumping, it's pretty high turbidity water. We refer to it as tea with milk or hot chocolate, or sometimes it's orangeade, depending on the season. But the wells are not pumping now, they're recharging. And I just wanted to show you the clarity of Gravelly Pond. This is over on the west side, looking out at that outcrop. The outcrop is here, the prominent boulder, which some people are reputed to have dived off of. And the water you're looking at goes from, the edge to about 3.5, 4 feet deep, and very clearly you can see all the material on the bottom. It's quite clear. It's not like a Adirondack lake clarity, but it's pretty impressive. Okay, so keep up the good work, Scott and Dana, and keep us posted. We're going to turn now to updates from working groups, and these will be brief. I haven't indicated particular groups, but I know I'd love to hear some of what Group 4 worked on a couple of nights ago, and I have a couple of comments from Group 1 and Group 5, and the floor will be open. Let me start with group one, which is usage. Two things to mention. One is that not only did Scott provide us with a pretty interesting case example, which is the little village of Katuitt, where he is a water commissioner, and where somehow or other they got their act together and put in what are called conservation rates, meaning more marked differences for heavy usage than most towns have and than we use. So that's a very interesting case study. But on top of that, Scott, who teaches grad students at Tufts and Harvard, has seconded I think it's a quartet of his grad students to go out and develop a bunch of case studies for this very question, because modeling turns out to be kind of a dead end. There's too many unknown parameters to model effectively. The right approach is to get case studies with anecdotal evidence and see if we can get enough of them that are similar enough to the situation with our user base and our water supply that we can make a credible argument about what might happen. Of course, the extremes here are that you raise the rates for the largest users and they all stop using drinking water. They drill private wells or sell their homes and whatnot. And in which case the revenue in the summertime in particular craters and we have to take up collections to pay Chuck and Nate, which would be awful. And the alternative is, people hardly notice and usage doesn't change very much, but revenues go up a lot. Neither of those is a particularly great outcome. So we really need to understand better what would happen if over time, say, select board was able to migrate to what are called conservation rates. The second thing is, so thanks again to Scott for that. The second thing is that Chuck mentioned when we were chatting about meter replacement, that while it's not in the 5-year plan, it is called for. And that means the meters on people's homes and the commercial establishments, because they're getting on 15 or more years of age and they're not as accurate as they would, and they're an old generation of meters. One of the vendors they've been talking to has offered to do a trial with the town, which would involve, if it was a couple of meters, it'd probably be free. If it was a dozen or 15, there'd be some charge, but not the full boat. And it just occurred to me that we might be the test pilots, meaning members of the task force might say, sure, swap out my meter for a state-of-the-art digital, cloud-connected, real-time water meter. And again, adding to the possibility of credibility when we make recommendations some months hence. And if we were fortunate, there may be among us somebody who's already doing a fair amount of irrigating, or maybe we know someone who's doing a fair amount of irrigating who would be inclined to participate in the experiment as well. So I just tossed that out there. I don't think we need to make a decision today, but I'd love to hear reactions, whether that seems like a good use of our time and a fairly small amount of money. Joe, you can unmute, and you have to unmute first. Can you do that, Joe? Maybe I can unmute you. No, I can't. I can only ask. Anybody else want to talk? Okay, well, please consider that. We'll take it up in our next meeting.
Steve,
Yes.
I know that when we had the group 6 meeting, Nate was there and also talked about that. And it seemed to be something that the people in group 6 were interested in. And he talked about the whole idea of maybe getting 15 to 20 meters that they would have to pay, because these meters that are presently in were replaced over, I think, a 3-year period of time, anywhere from 15 to 10 years ago. And now they're all slowing down. And since they're slowing down, then we're not getting true readings for the amount of water that's being used in our homes.
Good point. It could be part of the unaccounted for water. Exactly. Okay, Gordon or Jessica, do you want to give us a quick synopsis of where Group 4 is?
Sure. We are finishing up a couple of different work streams to try to pull together some draft information that we can bring back to this group soon. We sort of refreshed the data from the state website that we presented back in May, just to look at the contaminants and see if there was any new data. The only thing that's really been updated is the PFAS results there. So we've been looking at that, but there's no real changes to any of that. We're following up with some questions for the school and also the fire department, just about with the fire department. They are switching to a non-PFAS containing firefighting foam, and we just want to get a few more details on that. So we're following up with them, and with the school folks, we're trying to understand their salt treatments on the roadways and historically how much they've been using and their amenability to alternatives, things like that. And also talking to them about the field replacement, which these artificial playing fields are known to contain PFAS in the past, at least. And so they're in the process. There's a committee that's looking into replacing those fields now, at least one of them. And we're going to follow up with them with some questions to find out where they're leaning and see if we can encourage alternative material for that process. But we'll bring that back. We're just sort of doing information gathering right now. We'll bring that back to this full group, and then we can decide as a group what's the best recommendation or what do we do at that point. So I think that's pretty much everything. We are compiling a list of questions for Scott, and Scott will probably be reaching out to you just about how and if we can better understand where some of the salt and things like that might be coming from in the Lake Street well. So we had some specific questions about that we're going to share with you. And I don't know, was there anything else, guys? There was some very interesting information about the country club as well and their water usage. So I don't know.
Yeah, that was
tonight, or
that was clearly an area where we need to know more. We probably should learn more before we start stating what we think are facts.
But I see Francie's got her camera open. Francie, do you want to add anything else from our discussion?
No, you did it quite well. It's mostly questions right now.
Yeah.
We hope to get more info.
Yeah, good. And Scott?
Yeah, Steve, thanks for that report. That's great. Just a couple quick thoughts. One is, and I spoke to Steve about this again back in my home area. We have lower levels of PFAS showing up, and one thing we've asked our fire department to do is go back and create a inventory or summary of where they have put out fires in the past. We have about a 10 to 15 to 20 year flow time within our zone 2 area to our well. So we're asking for 20 years worth of data if they can provide it. And they also, much like you just said, our fire department also switched from PFAS related foams to non a number of years ago. So that might be something to consider in terms of if the data is readily available. Might be interesting to see if
the initial information we have is that it's not, and it's paper records, and it'll take a fair bit of work.
Okay.
But Tom, who's on our committee here, is a former firefighter, and anecdotally, I guess there has not been a lot of usage historically, and so that gives us some comfort. So I guess it will become a question of, is it worth the work to dig into the historical use, or should we just try to make sure going forward we don't use it? Yeah.
Good points. For Team 5, I'll just report that I've had the survey we designed back in, I think it was April, refreshed so that it could be, dates are updated. Board of Selectmen references are eliminated in favor of select board and things like that. And I would recommend releasing it soon for a couple of reasons. One is that Greg Federspiel's column later this week is going to be about us. And it's going to say that we're doing good work and making progress, and we're going to have some important things to say. So he's going to create some visibility for us. The second thing is we have a special town meeting 2 months hence. And I'd like, if possible, to have some interim results from the survey. They won't be definitive or controversial, I don't think, but there'll be a reason to ask more people to participate, assuming it's going to be a little bit of a tooth pull to get folks to fill out a survey. I'm generally pretty pessimistic about whether people cooperate with surveys, so I'm prepared to be pleasantly surprised, but prepared for the worst there. So the survey itself, I think some of you took it 4 or 5 months ago to test it. It has not changed substantively, just updated for dates and nomenclature. But I would make it available to anybody who wants to take it in a test mode online, or just look at the list of questions and options, because there's a Word document that contains all of it. So simply let me know if you want to do that, or let Sue know, and we'll get you either an online link or a file, Microsoft Word copy. Tom, anything from Team 6 you'd like to mention?
There we go. Team 6, the first thing I will say is that we were able to meet in the middle of the afternoon in room number 7 using one of the new big screens there. And we had someone call in from outside, happened to be our chair. And so we wound up with Steve Gang, about 5 feet wide and 5 feet tall on the screen, and 3 of us at the meeting. But it was a beautiful way, I thought, a nice way to have a meeting, and thanks Sue Croft for that. We have John Round is going to work with Chuck and Nate on coming up with an informational grid concerning water resources in the surrounding cities and towns, using the Hamilton study as a starter. And we have 5 or 6 questions for them to answer. We believe it might be worthwhile for team number 1 and team number 6 to meet together at some point, rather than going off in the same direction or opposite directions at the same time on conservation rates. Because I know that team 1 is spending some time on that, and we've been spending some time on that also. And Peter Calruso is working with ideas in terms of how to reduce the amount of finished water that's used for irrigation and landscape watering. We also had comment about the replacement of the meters, as I already mentioned. We also mentioned the whole idea that, is it possible for us to make our water bills more user friendly? In other words, if you get a energy bill and it lists out how much energy you've used from National Grid over the last 12 months, you can kind of see what's happening. Is it possible that we could get, say, like the last 4 bills of water usage showing up on our bill? Now that's a job not for us to do, but it's maybe to see if that possibly could happen. And then I guess one of the questions that we came up with is, who's responsible for checking on private wells for residential use or irrigation that are in our aquifer? Is that the Board of Health? Is it the Water and Sewer Commissioners? We're just not sure who might be responsible for that.
Good question. All right. I see Mike Carvalho is with us tonight. Mike, was there anything you wanted to tell us about the effects of climate change on our
Nothing
problems?
to report. I followed up on the lead that you had sent, Steve, requesting the state to call me back, and I have not heard back from them. This was on characterizing future climate change and hydrology in Mass using stochastic models. I'm not familiar with the pronunciation of that. STOCHASTIC models. And so I reached out to Mr. Stewart about that with USGS and have not heard back, but I will report back when I do.
Good. Good. I'm going to take a wild guess that stochastic is things that are partly determinative and partly random. So it's a way of accommodating the role of chance in what might otherwise be a tightly wound model.
Sounds like life.
Chuck, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention on the stuff Tom was mentioning, the private wells are all under the Board of Health when they're drilled by a professional well driller. But that's really just at the drilling stage. There's no checkup or follow-up that I know of unless they, are producing a certain threshold that they have reporting requirements to DEP. I think Gordon might have raised his hand to mention this too, but I think like the MAC used to be on a well, but I think were having high sodium. They had to report those things to DEP, and Board of Health may or may not have been copied on them, but I don't think it was the Board of Health that was requiring it, or what was going on there.
Thank you.
There's probably others around town. And then one other thing that I just want to say about the billings and things like that, it is actually a substantial cost, our billing, the way we do it right now. So I think and this could be somebody's recommendation or part of broader study on just water meters in general. But I was mentioning to Steve today that if we undertake a meter retrofit program where we replace all the meters in town, in my mind, that needs to include what they call a fixed network AMR system, where all of the meters you might know on your house, you have an MXU unit that we right now go around and we drive a truck around town, and that picks up the reading. That MXU is basically sending it basically a couple hundred feet to the end of the driveway, and we pick it up in the laptop in the truck. What a fixed network would do, and I think the most recent kind of iteration of this would be like a cell phone program where it would literally just call in your reading into the office. And so that's kind of the next generation I think that we're on now. In between, every vendor has a different way of doing it, but in general, a fixed network just means that that MXU on the side of your building will either broadcast directly to us in the office or some other designated location, and then brought back over fiber or some other signal back to the office, and then we generate the bills. Another aspect of this is the water meter people and vendors are lagging behind compared to the national grids of the world. But the next kind of thing that I think we would see when by the time we get around to doing ours is it will be app based. So every user will have the ability to get in their app for Town of Manchester Water and check their reading in real time. And they'll be able to use that information. They'll be able to set alarms. So, if your irrigation system is going off at, 4 PM instead of 4 AM, you can, get an alert that tells you that. And so it'll be much more hands-on for the people that want to be more hands-on. And so I think that's definitely relevant to what you guys are talking about, and something that, I would assume that would be part of our upgrade. And the other piece of that would be to do monthly billing. But I think monthly billing has to come with a caveat that, we don't want to send out 12 bills, via post mail every month. We would rather have online billing become the norm. And in this day and age, in my opinion, it has to be, so that we, maybe we have a couple of people opt out for whatever reason, but I'm hoping the general population will opt in. That would save us money on the postage side of things, but it would also allow people to, like I was mentioning to Steve today, if you get your July bill that happens to be, thousands of dollars when you were expecting it to be something else, and it's a monthly bill, and you have to pay that by, the middle of August, you're probably going to turn your irrigation system down rather than get your bill in September for the entire summer and say, well, that money's gone now anyway, or that water's gone. So, that's kind of part of the carrot and the stick that you guys talk about, that, I think going to monthly billing, conservation rates could be on the table. Eliminating deduct meters could be something that's on the table, or at least charging them differently. All of these types of things, and the billing side of it really needs to be addressed when we do that meter program. But I would say I don't really think it can be done until there is a meter program where we update the billing software and the software of the meters in general. So that's it's not something we could do tomorrow with our current situation.
Great, thank you, Chuck. I see hands up from Gordon and Peter. Gordon first.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. Just sort of playing off of that comment about the wells in town, I was able to pull the data set off of the state website with all of the wells, and it took a little time, but not all of them had GPS coordinates and things like that. But I do have a map now. I don't know if I can share that for a second, Steve, just in case people want to see it. And
we'll all be curious how many are close to the town well.
not a lot near the town well, a lot near the shore. I don't know if everybody can see that now.
Yep, so these would include residential, so-called domestic,
Yeah.
irrigation,
So for right,
commercial, and monitoring wells.
and monitoring well. So everything is lumped together right now, but the data set we have has all of them categorized, so we can start to color them differently. We can create the ability to click on these and get more information about them. They all have all the well drilling reports. So we have the groundwater at the time that they were drilled, which is variable over many, many decades. Anyway, I just thought it was an interesting data set, and might be of use to folks. If anybody wants it, I'm happy to share it with them and work on it with them. This one here, for instance, at 76 Summer Street was a recovery well.
Oh, yes.
So that one stood out because there was some contamination.
Cleanup of some underground tanks.
Yeah. And then the Lincoln Street well is right here. So that's not on here, but there are, there's some interesting locations, and I don't know how much we can use any of these for any kind of data collection. I think that's, we talked about that last time. That's maybe not that possible, but it's an interesting data set. So
interesting, because there should be some on the other side of School Street, because I know the doctor's office up there, I believe, is on a well. And
yeah,
I believe
so
there's some that's missing, but
there's definitely some missing.
The town well and the doctor's well are characterized as public water supplies. So they don't show up on this list.
But and there are, I should add, there's about 20 missing from the list from the state website, where there was no GPS coordinates, no description of where the location was, and no address. And so those I can't do much about, but everything else I did the best I can. A handful of these are newer wells, and they have GPS locations specified with them. But I would say the bulk of these do not. And so they're just sort of approximate locations. And we have a flag for that in the data set too. So you can see the ones that are sort of precise locations and those that are just on the property somewhere.
This is the data set that goes back to 1965.
65, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Good. Well, this is a big step forward. Thank you, Gordon.
And just because we were talking about a second ago, when we were looking at Scott Horsley's map, I was up here at the well looking at this map, and I have to admit, I don't know where this base map came from. And so take this with a grain of salt, but there's a little connection shown between Round and Chabaco, and there's something labeled as a Round Pond Dam and things like that. So yeah. We can look into whether this is on the state GIS.
Yeah, that connection was flowing before in the springtime before the drought.
Okay.
Peter,
that's a definite connection from Round to Chabaco all the time.
Okay. All right.
Peter Colarusso is next.
Yes, Chuck is correct. The Board of Health oversees the creation of the well. However, there's a huge void from that point on. The state does not actively pursue any changes and updating their database. It's more or less a voluntary from the resident. We are in the process of trying to update ours and our records now. There is approximately 15 wells that have no status whatsoever. So we're in the process now of trying to determine if they're active, if they're ever completed. There's one that was drilled but never had a pump put in it. So I don't know what that means. We'll probably have more information next week, but quite frankly, I don't have a lot of confidence in the data that we get from the state.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's an interest. I just thought it was an interesting data set to see where they were in town and to think that there might be some groundwater elevations hiding in there too.
In searching some other towns, some of them, in some cases, the Board of Health retains some authority to regulate and requires some reporting from private wells, so that at least they're able to tell which of them are still in service and not. Anne, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I was going to ask Gordon if it were possible in some way to overlay our water resource protection zones with the well map, so we can determine which ones actually are dealing. Thank you. You got it. I don't need to go any further.
Excellent idea. Okay, who haven't I asked about? Anything from Team 2 on potential new sources? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Next, I'm just going to put up the current version of the, I can find it, the timeline and work plan. This is a to-do for the select board and for our own purposes, of course. That's fairly important. So here it is. So along the left-hand side are the groups, group 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And right now we have input from 1, 2, 4, and 5. So even if it's just reporting relative completion, which might be the case in the case of Team 3, Group 3, we appreciate getting some milestones so we can roll this thing up. And didn't really intend to go through this in any detail tonight. So now we should probably bid good night to Scott so that we can have a free and open discussion of his proposal.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you all. Talk to you next month. Good night.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And now he's gone. I will say he seems to be enjoying himself so much working on this project with us in Manchester. I was half thinking that he should be paying us. I'm definitely going to have to get that canned laughter so that. Okay, so Sue, would you be able to narrate this? I'll put it up on the screen, but I know you've been involved in working it through to its current state.
Sure.
Okay, here it is. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Make it a little bigger.
So basically, for the purposes of continuing to pay Scott for the wonderful work that he is doing with the task force, we needed to have an amended work proposal from him. And basically, this is an estimate of his best guess from now until June of 2023, the amount of hours that he's probably going to put into helping us continue this. And I'm assuming that by June 2023, we're probably going to be done as a task force. So I only had him go out as far as that anyway. I'm guessing that will be done and maybe even hopefully before then. But this is really just an estimate from him to say, based on the work that I've been doing and the amount of time that we've been meeting and what I know that is coming up, this is what I think are going to be the number of hours that I'm going to be working. So as you can see on here, it's meeting time at 3,600 and then technical support at 2,400, which I think we have plenty of money in the budget. I think we had for this year, this fiscal year, we had set aside, and you might know this since John's not here, I think it was $80,000 was our budget item for the task force. So there's plenty of money there for this, and I will leave it at that.
Yeah, by the time this money would have been spent, plus the work that Dana is leading, that would be about half of the 80,000.
Right. Anybody have any questions?
Right now, the only other item I'm aware of is the possibility that we would use some of our budget to underwrite this experiment with meters, and that would be small thousands of dollars.
Right. So, I mean, even if there's the need for some additional, engineering type of project that's not too big, we're still in good shape.
Questions, comments from the task force? Okay, hearing none. Can I have a motion to approve this and send it to the select board for their approval?
Steve, I'll make a motion that we approve or we recommend to the Board of Selectmen, the Select Board, the contract dated September 12th, 2022 from Scott Horsley.
Second?
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor? Sue, can you call the roll? I continue to be confused about who's a member, who's an alternate.
Okay, it starts with you.
I'm an aye.
Since John Round is not here, we'd have Ann Harrison.
Aye.
Since Ron Mastrodoglimo is not here, we would ask Sarah Creighton to vote.
Aye.
Peter Colarusso.
Aye.
I don't think David Lumsden is here, is he?
No.
Okay. Francie in Jessica's absence.
Actually, Gordon is the chair of our working group.
Yes, but you're representing Stream Team.
Team, okay, aye.
Okay. Helen Bethel.
Yes.
Mike Carvalho.
Yes.
Jeff Koshand.
Yes.
Tom Keogh.
Yes,
And Gordon Turner.
Yes.
And that's everybody.
I declare it's unanimous. Thank you. We'll get that up to the select board for their review at their next occasion and opportunity. Thank you. Next is the minutes from the August 24 meeting. Does anyone have any corrections or additions to that? Hearing none, I'll move that we accept the August 24 minutes as submitted. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And I'll ask for any objections to the motion to accept the August 24 minutes. And hearing none, I declare they are approved and accepted. Now we have to set a date for our next meeting. And if we stick with our 3-week interval, when would that be? October 5. What does that conflict with? I don't see anything on the town calendar. Of course, the town calendar is rarely out that far. Anyone who can't make that meeting, just at this point, knows that, speak up.
Did you say October 5th?
Mhm.
I just missed that part. Sorry.
Okay, so we are set to meet October 5th at 7 p.m. I assume still on Zoom. And are there any other items not reasonably anticipated when the agenda was composed? This long pause is because the commuter rail is going past my window. Thank you. Well, then I guess we get time off for good behavior, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second, moved and seconded. Any objections to adjournment?
none.
Hearing none, I declare we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
All right.
Thank you.